ahead of his time, and that he was an intercept operator in Chinese, whereas in those days the Russians were the chief bad guys, or at least for a long time they were. But I got to tell you, intercept operators, they had to know, not only did they have to have complete knowledge of the language that they were dealing with, but they also had to know the context. So they were linguists with a capital L and experts with a capital E. I was a linguist with a small L, and that was nothing compared to what I was doing. So anyhow, you've heard enough from me, and I hope you can listen to him and learn something. Because he's kept up. Not only was he an intercept operator when he was on active duty, but he has also over the years kept up with what's going on in China, and he has his own unique viewpoint to share with us.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to have this opportunity to present myself and to give you a little background on China, the Chinese people, how they think, some of the language. I think you'll learn a lot. We're going to go over three things. First, some things you'll find very interesting. Some will give you pause to think. And then others will give you some great concern. So, first of all, I don't know if you can see this. I hope you can. I'm going to just draw for you the Chinese character. Okay, sorry about this.
We're sorry too.
You got a 75-year-old here, voice intercept operator, so bear with me.
That's okay. You're the young guy.
All right. I don't know if you can see this. I wanted to draw this character. Okay, it starts with the world. It's a square.
Okay.
And a line down the middle. That's the Chinese character for China.
Okay.
Zhongguo. Okay. They see themselves as the center of the world. That's their mindset. So everything revolves around China. They've been around a long time, thousands of years, different dynasties. They view us, the United States, since we're a young country, as like pre-teenagers. In their own mind, that's how they see us. With age comes wisdom. So they believe they're a lot wiser than we are. They came out with a book. Some of you might be familiar with it, called The Art of War. It was published by a general by the name of Sun Tzu. This book is a ruse. It really does not talk about how the Chinese conduct their warfare. The Chinese conduct their warfare and take over countries from within. They do it in 4 ways: by bribery, extortion, I should say, and deception and espionage. That's how they take over a country. They're here in the United States already. It began with some of the Confucius Institutes that were here in the United States and some of our major colleges throughout the United States. It wasn't until Senator Ted Cruz from Florida decided to expose the fact that they're here as a propaganda machine for our young people. Then they bought up a lot of our land. I think to date, they own over 200,000 acres in the United States, agricultural land, but it happens to be right next to our military bases. the COVID pandemic, and then TikTok. And now, to date, there are 43,000 approximately Chinese national illegal immigrants here in the United States. Now, bear in mind, the most powerful man in the world, if you were to Google it, would come up Xi Jinping, the emperor, dictator, ruler of mainland China. He doesn't allow anyone to leave his country without his blessing or knowledge thereof. So that's the one thing that should give us concern. Okay, why are they here? Now, FBI Director Wray was stating in front of Congress the other day that he thinks they're here to interfere with our infrastructure or our grids. But they're here already, just so you know. Now, Xi Jinping is the most powerful man in the world. You can Google that, and his name will pop up. But his power doesn't come in the way we look at a man of ultimate power. We think of a man of ultimate power as maybe a billionaire who has a yacht, a plane, a lot of possessions, owns maybe 2 or 3 different islands. That's not how the Chinese view it. The Chinese see the most powerful man in the world as someone who controls 4 things: the media, the internet, education, and the military. That makes him the most popular man in the world. He controls all those 4 things. Now, here's what will give you pause. Remember I said I was going to give you something that would give you a little pause to think about? You would have to agree that China may be the biggest threat to our democracy. And the biggest threat to our democracy, if we can equate China with Xi Jinping, he is the biggest threat to our democracy. But how in the world did we allow his only daughter here in the United States? She lived here for 4 or 5 years recently. She attended Harvard University. She attended that school under a pseudonym. And she graduated, and her degree is in what else? Philosophy. So now, keeping in mind that the Chinese are experts at bribery, extortion, deception, espionage, are we being compromised? The Chinese own the majority of Disney. Now, here's another thing that may give you pause. Taiwan. The Chinese consider Taiwan, the old island of Formosa, as already a province of China. They really don't need to take that over, even though that's a concern for the United States, because in their mind, they already have. Now, here's the concern. In Taiwan, there are 2 major criminal organizations, the largest being called the Bamboo Union. The head of that Bamboo Union is a man nicknamed White Wolf. Now, in China, the color white represents death and mourning. White Wolf, under the blessing of Xi Jinping, traveled to Mexico, met up with the cartel, created labs in an area called Sonora, Mexico. Those labs are there to produce heroin and fentanyl. Heroin is called the black goat. Fentanyl labs have extended. They're outside of Sonora, and some exist right outside Mexico City itself. So here's the thing that gives me pause. White Wolf is a Taiwanese national. He travels back and forth from China. So fentanyl is killing a lot of our young people. They are here. They are here already. The invasion has begun. And so we need to be aware of it. I wanted to make you pause and think about these things because the Chinese, it's just their way of doing business. And we have to be aware of it, especially the military. And you all are in a position, guide, to lead, to educate. And so I hope that some of this instruction and knowledge is useful for you. I do want to lighten it up a little bit. When I went to language school, which was at the Presidio of Monterrey, the Defense Language Institute, it's a joint military school, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and maybe a few FBI agents thrown in there. The school teaches 47 different languages. Okay, Chinese and Russian, at the time I was in, during the Vietnam era, were the two biggest. The Navy, since most of you are Navy personnel, they had a banner on their wall because they were investing a lot of money in us to learn that language. So the Navy, on the walls of the school, on the corridors, they had a banner that said, if you fail, you sail. And it had a picture of a submarine on it. The Army, if we failed, we would go to cook school. And I'm not sure about the Air Force or Marines. But anyway, another interesting story was one of our professors came to class one day. They're all from mainland China who had defected. As a matter of fact, the head of the Chinese department at that time, this is like 50 years ago, T.Y. Chang. He was a officer in the PLA, People's Liberation Army in China. And he was director of the Chinese Mandarin program at the school. Well, this particular professor, another teacher, a Chinese national, who was a prominent businessman, entrepreneur in China who had defected, he came in to teach us a class one day, and he had a mop bucket on his head. True story. And all of us in the class, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, we were kind of chuckling, wondering what was going on. One of the students went out and got T.Y. Chang, the director. Director pulled that teacher out of the class, and then he came in. And he explained to us that this professor, growing up in China, he grew up there, placed this bucket on his head because he would get frequent migraines. And he thought having the bucket on his head, the metal, would protect him from evil spirits invading his head, causing the migraines. Interesting. Then we had a teacher, a female. Her name was Miss Lily Wu. And now we were in class learning Chinese Mandarin through the Army Security Agency, in my case. And we were wondering, we were in during Vietnam, so we were wondering why Miss Lily Wu was about to teach us a Chinese song that the young girls in China would learn. And it was something like this: Mao Mao Yu, which means it's raining. Xia Ge Buting, non-stop. 我不要你的银 I don't want your money. 我不要你的金 I don't want your gold. 我就要你的心 I only want your heart. Well, she sang that song in class, and then we were wondering, why in the world would she sing us this song? But what she explained later was that the Chinese aren't interested in any country's gold or silver. They just want to own us. They want our hearts, our souls. They want to own us. And they do it in the 4 ways I explained. Because I want you to understand the Chinese mentality. They take over countries by bribery, extortion, deception, and espionage, and they are experts at it. In the realm of education, we have lost something here. And in my way of thinking, we lost our patriotism in our schools. Our schools don't say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. Prayer's been taken out of school. Our young people are not really patriotic anymore. They take a knee to the Star-Spangled Banner. I just recently heard on the news that our college students were burning the flag of the United States and chanting "Death to America." These pro-Palestinian demonstrators. Now, a lot of brave men, our brave men and women, died for that flag. In my opinion, and my opinion only, anyone in this country who burns our flag and yells "Death to America" should be jailed immediately. We lost this sense of patriotism in this country, and we need to revive it. TikTok has really put an influence on our young people and really took away our patriotism. That's why it's so hard now for the military to recruit young people. We don't have the movies anymore, like the old movie, The Green Berets, and the movies of Audie Murphy, the most decorated hero. We don't have those kind of movies. We don't see this patriotism anymore. And we need to revive it in this country. In China, if anyone says anything against Xi Jinping or the government or the PLA, the People's Liberation Army in China, they're either tortured or immediately put to death. Now, I'm not saying that should happen here, but I am saying we need to revive patriotism here in the United States. We got to have, these young people have to have skin in the game. The media has really done us a disservice in the military. And I'm going to say this because the Chinese never let on what they're about to do. They don't talk or ever. You never hear anything of the Chinese military strategies, what they intend to do. Our media, on the other hand, when we were giving weapons, ammunition to Ukraine, or for that matter, Israel, we not only televise what we're going to do, but very specific about the arms, ammunition, and things that we're going to give them. It does us harm in the military. China had two capitals at one time. Beijing, the north capital, and Nanking, the southern capital. And through its history, there are actually four capitals in China. Our Capitol buildings, everything is centered in Washington, D.C. Well, we could take a pause here. Maybe Washington, D.C. is on the East Coast. Maybe we can have a capital on the West Coast. Deception. Maybe we can learn from the Chinese about deception. Remember, they're the experts on it. I have had the pleasure of, when we went through the Chinese Mandarin course, because we were a small group, of getting to know a lot of the instructors, and especially the chairman of the department, T.Y. Chang. He taught us a lot about how the Chinese think, so that when we're learning the language, we know how they think. For example, if I was to write a letter to someone in China, it would read something like this: USA, New Jersey. So things go from the largest to the smallest. Kind of makes sense. If you ever went to a Chinese restaurant and they served you tea, you'll see those little teacups. None of them have handles. There's not a handle in China. You know why? The Chinese believe if it's too hot to hold in your hand, it's too hot to put to your lips. Kind of makes sense. There's not a fortune cookie in China. They were invented here on the streets of San Francisco. The only soup you'll find in China, for the most part, the original soup, is egg drop. So I wanted to give you like kind of an overview of Chinese, their language, which I'll do that right now. In Chinese, there are four tones. So one word could have four different meanings. For example, ma, M-A. Ma, level tone, means mother. Ma means to scold. Ma means horse. And ma means rock. So one word could have four different meanings. Drove me crazy. The only way you can know what that word means is from the context. So, I just recently heard that in the Red Sea now, the Chinese have ships there, and they're escorting cargo ships. I can tell you as a voice intercept operator, the Chinese are there with their ships to learn about our ships. That's why they're there. And they do it through their own voice intercept operators. So, two can play the same game. We should be listening to them, and we should be gaining as much knowledge as we can about their ships. They are of our ships and aircraft carriers. They're doing the same. Trust me on that one. That's what they're all about. Bribery, extortion, deception, espionage. Again, I say they're experts at it. I'm opening this up to any questions you may have. I had the honor and privilege of being in during the Vietnam era. Since I was a warrant officer, I taught new recruit voice intercept operators in Chinese. And this is a distinct honor, really, to address the Navy personnel. If I helped in any way, I'm I'm proud to do so. And I open it up. If anybody has any questions, please raise them now, and I'll be glad to answer them the best I can.
What kind of things were you intercepting? What was the Chinese mission during the Vietnam timeframe?
Sure. During Vietnam, well, the first thing is that I didn't know originally, but now I do. And at the time I learned that in North Vietnam, the borders China. About 800 miles of it borders China. And at that time, the Chinese were furnishing the VC, Viet Cong, Charlie, with ammunitions, weapons, even instructors. My job was to tell our commander what was coming into the hands of the VC by way of China. Very specific. So we'd be listening with our headphones on. We'd be writing what was called a first pass. It was kind of like shorthand, and it was very detailed because that's what our commanders wanted on the field. At that same time, simultaneously, we had a recorder. At that time, it was reel-to-reel. So these voice intercept transmissions, high-frequency FM transmissions, were being placed on a recorder. So we couldn't write everything down, but everything was being recorded that they were saying. Those tapes were carried to the NSA, the National Security Agency, where then they were dissected and went over by analysts. So we worked 12-hour shifts, day and night, round the clock. We were at 3 different posts. One was called a fixed post. That basically was a hut with a high-frequency FM antenna draped in camouflage. We were there. That's called a fixed site intercept.